Auburn. So I focused on a 0.6 mile corridor of Auburn Avenue, which is also a historic district. But going in to look at my framework, I thought that it was important, since I was doing a corridor plan, to focus on more than Mount Auburn itself, because if you focus in on Mount Auburn itself, it's a little bit difficult because the main driver in Mount Auburn, specifically on Auburn Avenue, is Christ Hospital. And while that is a huge employment center and a huge drive for other people to the neighborhood, there aren't a lot of other amenities, and in fact there are virtually no other amenities. So what's really crucial about Mount Auburn is that it's in this really important place that it's kind of a spine between uptown and downtown, connecting the two. And so its proximity to these other places that have a strong sense of amenities, which I've categorized in weekly, monthly, and seasonal, is really important. So even though Mount Auburn itself doesn't currently have a lot of amenities, it's so close to these other places and well connected to them that it is still a great area to be in. So focusing in on Auburn Avenue itself, and on that historic district that goes along Auburn Avenue, it has, I've looked at, these main roads, which are important in itself, and I've identified 3 different nodes. The first one being at East McMillan Street at the very northern part of the site. So where that intersection is, it's, obviously those are 2 main streets coming together. Where Christ Hospital is obviously a huge node because there's a lot of traffic coming to that itself. And then the third one being the intersection of Auburn Avenue and Dorchester. And something that's important to note right now is that it's not necessarily a huge node because of what's happening there now, because its existing conditions right now aren't great. There are boarded up buildings there, but this gorgeous, unique building, this great park space, which is Hopkins. It's very well designed, but I don't think because of its current conditions around it, it's not very well utilized. And then you have a surface lot with a little building called Body Snatcher in the middle of it. So right now it's this really great intersection, but it's in really bad shape. So some of the other things that are along Auburn Avenue is a lot of parking, a lot of surface parking, which is not ideal, especially because it is often off Auburn Avenue. So you having surface parking that's facing this historic district is not ideal. But a really strong asset in Mount Auburn is its immense amount of green space. Some of this is because of the topography issue, so there's a lot of wooded area and there's a lot of tree canopy. But there are areas like Inwood Park and Hopkins Park that I mentioned, and then a recreation center that have very ideal green space that's, in good condition, that can just be a little better utilized, maybe if you bring a little bit more attention to the area. So then you do have these areas where there's some very severe topography, which is obviously tough to design around, but it also does bring assets like great views, which Mount Auburn is kind of known for. And then you do take a look at the public and private space. So when I was looking at what I was going to develop along this corridor, I didn't focus on any single family housing because the housing stock off of Auburn Avenue for single family is very strong right now. And so because Mount Auburn is in this kind of area that it's, like I said, it's kind of a spine between uptown and downtown, and it has such immense development on both ends of it, that it's kind of inevitable that that development is going to converge and kind of come to the middle. And so when I was starting this project, I focused a lot on researching and kind of seeing what development was planned for that currently. And there was quite a bit. So my overall site plan kind of has 3 different buildings going on. It has existing buildings, it has proposed buildings from other entities, one of which is Uptown, which is building has a huge residential development plan, and then buildings that I have proposed. So in the northern area, there is a very large office space planned with a parking structure. And then Uptown has planned development. I've infilled some areas. And then in the southern part, the really cool kind of Flatiron building at Dorchester Avenue has also been said to be getting ready to be turned into condos. So that is exciting. So when I was developing, I developed around that because I thought it was important that since there are kind of existing plans that are great, I thought that building off of that would be beneficial. So that's kind of how I approached it. So one of my first sites is right across from Christ Hospital. It is a large apartment building, and what's good about this is that the interior space for shared space is really strong. So it has a library, it has a gym and rehab facility, it has a common kitchen and party room and living space for the residents to interact with, and then it has a outdoor space that's kind of protected from the busyness of the hospital itself, so it's kind of a much more private area. And so there are other residential buildings planned along the corridor that I've done, but what brings these residential buildings together is the shared community space. So even though these other residential buildings may not have their own amenities like a gym in them themselves, they have a shared kind of key card fob concept that everyone can come in and come to this facility for those amenities. And so moving on to the second site that I really focused on was that intersection that I said was kind of crucial. And so there is this building to the left is a multi-use building. On the first floor is retail, so it would be really kind of transparent, and so it would kind of activate that street a little bit more, have a really wide sidewalk there for a lot of outdoor seating with apartment units above. And then on the right is a set of townhomes that from the outside it looks like townhomes, because when I was talking with Cindy, kind of the idea that creating a space for this user group that looks very unassuming from the outside and fits in with the character of the area, especially because this is in a historic district, is important. So having the feel that this looks like townhomes from the outside, but it actually has an open floor plan in the inside of it. So it looks like different townhomes, but there's actually no structural walls in between that are, dividing that area. So it's kind of a community home feel. So it would have a shared kitchen space and living space, but individual bedrooms. And so the idea behind this is so that these residents can kind of, maybe they aren't fully independent, and maybe they don't want to be in these apartments that they are cooking their own meals and doing all of that. So the idea that they can come together and make a meal together and be very a close-knit community. And if, maybe after a few years of that, they've decided that they've developed those skills a lot and they are kind of ready to move on, they can move on to the other housing options in the area that are more independent. And so also, this is important because the townhome community home concept faces that Hopkins Park, which is already very well designed, just very underutilized because of the lack of people that are right there. So facing that and having that wraparound patio idea so that you're not only facing that new first floor retail that's kind of transparent and bringing people out on the street there, but then also the interaction with the Hopkins Park. So something that is nice about Auburn Avenue is that it does currently have fairly wide sidewalks, which is important because of the topography issues. So, if people are walking, they do want to feel that they are have a wide enough berth from that busy street. But I think a planting strip with trees would kind of give that a safer and more intimate feel. And in a lot of the research that we did about the history of Mount Auburn, it was kind of described as having this small town feel. And I think that is because it, even though it's kind of a heavy connector with a lot of traffic, there isn't that necessary there's not a Starbucks and there's not all this commercial development that's happening that, is bringing in all these outsiders. So kind of bringing in that development, but maintaining that small town feel and that intimate feel, and kind of protecting from the streets like that. And so another thing that's good is there's a lot of main bus routes that go along Auburn Avenue. So having lanes wide enough to continue to use that. And I think it's also important with our user group with physical disabilities is that if you don't necessarily feel that you can travel along Auburn Avenue either on your own, you do have the ability to have the bus routes, which are very frequently used. And so here you can kind of see at the top there is that proposed commercial space. Okay. So you can see here the kind of different uses. There's a lot of multifamily residential with some retail mixed in to kind of activate that space, but not so much so that they kind of lose their identity as that small town feeling. That is all.